When I was a little girl, this little girl, I lived in an imaginary world, a world where I could be safe because my environment was so incredibly emotionally violent and fraught with all sorts of other things going on as well. And I want to make this video to speak to the person who made this comment and also anyone else out there that's going to find this helpful. Reading your comment, I understand you, I see you, I know what you went through, and it is heartbreaking that you are carrying any part of the blame or gaslighting yourself into feeling like maybe it wasn't that bad and that sort of thing. And that's actually a pretty common takeaway that we have until we really start to intellectualize what the power dynamic was and understand what it is that forces a child, and then even into adulthood, what forces a person to live in, well, a dissociative state. I'm going to read your comment and then I'll break it down all the way through, and well, let's get into it, shall we? Thank you for being here. I so appreciate you. Just before we even go there, I want you to know that, and I hope this video helps you. I love your channel and have been following for a while, and you don't have to answer this, but is this always a trauma symptom? I'm still questioning whether it was my own fault that I made up some of the fantastical world in my head, or if it really was abuse. Running away at 26, and I realized that I was constantly just in my room for almost 3 decades and disassociating to safety, to a world where I was loved and appreciated. Still feels like I did it to myself and that I was simply too weak to handle my parents' rough treatment. I feel responsible for almost missing out on 3 decades worth of life. I never knew others felt like me. After I ran away, I felt like I had woken up from a coma. Years lost in disassociation and so many empty spots in my memory, but the fog slowly lifted and I was actually living. Now I go out often and meet as many people as I can and make memories, but that wasn't simply possible back at home. It still feels like my fault. 100% yes. Disassociation is a trauma response. I'm a mom of 3. And I got to witness up close and personal what it looks like to raise children in safety and what their behaviors look like. And actually, we had a blended family. So at one point, I had 5 children that I was responsible for raising, and with pleasure. That sounds so formal. And watching how they played, I recognized what the difference was. They would play using their imagination, which can mean making up little characters and things like that. And yes, going into their own little world, but still connected to the real world, still in the world around them. It looks different, as opposed to a child like me, like you, so in their world that while we have that hypervigilance and we're aware of what's going on around us, we're not actually connected to it. And depending on the circumstance, we might even be going out of body, which I'm definitely a professional at, still can grab into that to this day. I don't need to, I don't want to, but I can do it if I have to. I can't see a moment where I have to do that, but I look at the things that I used that were my coping mechanisms, like my hypervigilance, for example, as a superpower now, and it's a useful tool for me. Also, I look at it as an early warning sign. So for example, if I find myself going into the pick-me girl or the good little girl mode, I know something's happening that's triggering that off. Sometimes it's very apparent and sometimes it's subtle. That's my body speaking to me. So all of these things we can use to our benefit. Anyway, to get back to your question, yes, 100% of the time it is. Think about this. if as a little child, a medium-sized child, a teenage child, an adult child, you felt safe with the people whose job it was to actually provide that safety. If as that child, you needed to go into a world to find a way to provide yourself safety, that means that there was something so horrific going on that you just couldn't stay there and survive it. Do you know what that actually takes? A tremendous amount of strength and resilience that somehow you found. And you found a mechanism, whether conscious or not, that provided you the ability to have a little bit of stability in your world. I have a handful of people that I've interacted with over the years who knew me when I was a child. Some of them were children at the same time, so they were my peers. Some of those people are adults. And I always ask them, what did you think of me as a little girl? Because I was told by my mother that everybody knew that I was sick in the head, and that everybody knew I was damaged goods, and that everybody knew I was a tramp. They used to call it boy crazy. So she would soften the language and get everybody on board to somehow let me know by proof that the narrative was in place. So for example, everybody knows you're a liar. My aunt had been calling me a liar from the age of 4, one of my aunts. My other aunt would refer to me as being in an imaginary world. I had a big imagination and I made up stories, which was not untrue, right? So growing up in an environment where I knew that I was poisoned, basically, and that everybody hated me, in adulthood caused me to want to find out from other people what I look like to them. And do you know what every single one of them said? Completely unrelated to each other, some of them not knowing each other at all for even a millisecond, independently. You always looked really happy and you were always kind of dancing around, and it was like you lived in your own little world. And we thought you were the sweetest thing, that too. It can never be a child's fault when an adult abuses them. It can never be anybody's fault when a person abuses us, but particularly in that power dynamic. I want you to look at this little girl. You were a little child too. What could you have possibly done? What could she have possibly done to bring on so much cruelty that we had to escape into our imagination to be safe? And in reference to the coma, that's common. In fact, I would say that more than 3/4 of my clients have referred to where they are in their healing at some point in time as feeling like they've woken up out of a coma, that they're actually in their body now and living life like you are. And it's a really hard thing, because we feel that because we're adults and because we've left the system or have distance from the system, whatever that looks like, we should just be able to wake up and enjoy life and leave it all behind us because we're safe now and all that. And that's just not the way that it works, especially since we carry all those wounds and messages with us for such a long time, thinking that it was our fault and there's something wrong with us. That makes it difficult to even want to wake up, because what if we do and we find out that's true? It takes a long time to come into our own. It takes a long time and experiences, contrast, seeing that our normal was abuse. It wasn't actually healthy and normal. I assumed when I was a little girl, I remember thinking when I would go to my friends' houses and I wanted their mommy to be my mommy, I also had this feeling of, well, that's the mommy I see. I'm sure when I leave, they're going through what I go through. That was our normal. So when you're questioning all these things and you're like, was it really what I thought it was? Or, it was my weakness as a child and all of this, that, and the other. Have you ever looked at somebody else's child, because I don't know if you have children, and thought, oh, they're horrible, somebody should be abusing them? For me, it was really helpful to have children because they had my mannerisms and different ways that I would act and react to different circumstances, and all of them were, they're individual humans, right? They're all very different in certain ways and very much the same in other ways. And it gave me an opportunity to see myself and understand what was done to me and what forced me into that imaginary world. And even running away at the age of 13, I ended up living on the streets. And guess what? When social services sent me back home, they didn't ask me any questions, and everybody, this is actually everybody in my narcissistic family system, all of the relatives said the very same thing to me using different words. How could you do this to us? How could you do this to your grandfather, who was CSAing me, by the way? How could you do this to your mother? Do you know what you did to this family? They all blamed me collectively. So that's the other part of this, right? We wonder why we blame ourselves and then we gaslight ourselves and we're still not really sure. It's hard to be sure in the face of an entire group of adults who are facilitating the abuse. It's hard to be the one standing alone and feel like we're not the crazy ones, but we're not. And you know the proof of it? Crazy people stay in crazy. Crazy people, I'm using the word for effect here. The definition to me of being a crazy person would be the willingness to stay in a dysfunctional family system and watch children be abused and facilitate that abuse. To me, crazy, from my own experience, is that all of that narcissistic family system, all those people are standing together, even in the face of verified criminal activities perpetrated by my mother as recently as 2014, and probably other things I don't know about. They know she's the criminal. Even if they're in denial of my child abuse, which they are not, they're still standing with her, not me. That's fucking crazy. Just saying. Sanity is realizing that you don't want to be a part of a system that hurts you. Doesn't that make more sense? Right? It would be insane to stay in a system, or it shows a tremendous lack of self-love, which is understandable because I hated myself. I hated this little girl for a very, very long time. Escaping that family system is a sign of good mental health. It's a sign that you, somewhere inside of you, know that you don't deserve what they were doing. And that's something we can then build upon, right? I'm going to review a little bit of your comment because I want to make sure that I didn't leave anything out. I want to go back to where you said, if you can't tell, I don't rehearse these videos because I really want to be able to interact from a very kind of on the spot, authentic place. Not that rehearsing or scripting it wouldn't be authentic, but I just like this kind of interaction better. I don't like to overthink things. I've had enough overthinking in my life. Still feels like I did it to myself and that I was simply too weak to handle my parents' rough treatment. You survived your parents' rough treatment. That takes strength. I would love for other survivors out there to please, I want to see your name. I don't know if your name is there. Okay, it feels like just a screen name, not your name. I could be wrong. Anyway, everybody out there who sees this video, can you do me a favor? Can you show the person who commented some love and support and maybe share your experiences as well? You were a child, just like me. We shouldn't have had to be strong enough to find disassociation to survive. And it sounds like, for the most part, like me, you're living your best life. And I'm really, really happy for you. I love that you love this channel. I love that you're a part of this community, and I value you so much. And I really, really appreciate you taking the time to leave this comment and to share and ask the question. And I'll see you soon. Thanks again for being here.